Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This time of year I normally do an end of season update where I try and film every single plant and discuss how it's done in this year's growing season. It uses up far too much of my time, quite honestly. I mean, I've done it in past years, I've done a start of season and an end of season, but this year's different because of what's going on. The fact that I'm sort of doing videos on the dendrobiums as we go into autumn and then into winter, those can be now treated totally separately. And as part of that, I recently filmed the continuous growers, so that is their end of season update effectively. The holy clay pots are often filmed and looked at, so I'm keeping those separate. And then you sort of think, well, what does that leave then? Well, basically it mainly leaves potted orchids that don't come into any of those things, plus a few mounted ones that are not dendrobiums. So I'm watering pots today. I'm probably going to miss the mounts out because we've had two consecutively dull days on the trot, and with the shorter day lengths I'm reducing my watering already, basically, just responding to, you know, not so much heat during the day for not as long, and some dull days where there is no heat. I mean, in here at the moment it's less than 20 degrees. It's probably not, unless the sun comes out, it's not going to get much warmer than that during the day. So the plants aren't going to use up their water and any feed that they get given. So I'm already at that stage where I'm reducing feed levels down from their really active growing periods. Now, in amongst some of the others are, you know, I mean, like the Oncidiums, they're effectively continuous growers, but they can only do that if they're given the circumstances to allow them to continuously grow vigorously. And as the day lengths shorten and the temperatures drop down a bit on average, they won't grow as quickly. And yes, they will try and still grow on, but they can't do it as quickly without the day lengths and the associated temperatures. I've recently filmed the cooler growers, and I included my Paphiopedilums in that, so they don't need doing now. So what's left isn't that bad. So it shouldn't take loads of time. And what I thought I'd do is, out of the potted and mounted videos that I'm going to water today, I'm going to pick on the ones that are doing well. Yeah? And then the next time I come round to watering those, I'll pick on those that aren't doing so well, because I don't like to give a false impression. I know some people, especially quite new, might think that everything in here is doing marvellously. Well, it's not. I don't want to give a false impression. There are some plants I'm struggling with. You know, some rescues that are just not doing very well. In some cases might not be long for my world as a consequence. But anyway, that's what I'll try and film today is, as I go round, I'll pick on the good stuff, the big stuff, the stuff that's growing well, and we'll have a look at those. And there will be a variety. It's not all Oncidium types. There are others mixed in there as well. So we'll pick up on those today. This is my Oncidium Variegated Rogers EI, variety Balding. But it's not called that anymore, it's completely changed its flipping name, but I'm sticking to what I was given. Now this has not a good progression on it, because the bulb here was the one that was in bloom when I bought it. The next growth it produced was smaller, but it still bloomed. And this growth is slightly smaller again, but it still bloomed. I've just taken the spike off now, literally, as the blooms were fading. The benefit that this one's got this time round is that the next new growth it produces, it doesn't need a repot. So it gets to produce its next growth undisturbed in the pot, which in theory means roots should get straight into the media and literally not get a setback, not get any disturbance whatsoever. So I'm hoping the next growth it produces will be a reasonable size. Now this one always looks like it's shriveled, but these pseudo bulbs on this particular Oncidium are ribbed naturally. So although it looks a bit shriveled, the back one is. But these are what the bulbs look like. The only difference is they should be larger than that. In ideal conditions it should be producing bulbs like this. Yeah, but I suspect when I got this plant that it was a piece taken off of a much larger plant. And the older a plant gets and the bigger it gets, the stronger it gets, the more there is the ability to produce those larger bulbs. So we're working from this one now. New growth should come out near the base of that and shouldn't be too long in starting on the grounds the spike's just been taken off. Tends to be a pattern with most Oncidium types. Not too long after blooming and the spikes are removed, you get the new growth. And in theory, this one has got about a 10-month cycle on it, so it's not annual. So the blooms successively appear earlier in the year. You know, one day they'll flip and appear in the winter. But anyway, that's that one. Now this is Miltonidium Peter Comp, or should I say they are, because there's effectively two plants in here. Last time it was repotted, the older pseudobulbs were taken off, leaving two leads, so I potted them up in the same pot, which I'm going to emphatically say I'm going to stop doing this because they end up in a larger pot to get the pieces in when they probably do better in a more snug pot. So this will be the last time this happens. And the other reason for it being a nuisance is that they've grown to the edge of the pot. So the next new growth on here has got nowhere to go. And likewise here, the next new growth, already some of these roots have gone aerial. Yeah, although there's stacks in the pot, so I don't need to worry. But yeah, I mean, this is its last spike. This particular growth produced a spike on both sides. The one this end, smaller piece, less vigour, less strength, only produced one spike. Yeah, but these will be potted up as separate plants from now on. And I will wait. I will patiently wait for signs of those new growths. Check my records to find out when the roots are actually produced. But looking at the majority of the roots on this, they've been produced quite a while ago. They're not shiny new ones, yeah, so they probably come out not long after the new growth. Yeah, a little bit of deduction there. If they came out when the bulbs were almost mature, they'd still be squeaky new, and they're not. These are older roots down in here, and as a consequence there will probably be a little bit of root loss when it's repotted from the existing roots, so it's still best to wait till the new ones start. And that could even be at different times, because this piece finished blooming a while ago now, so this one is probably going to produce its new growth first. But yeah, we'll get those potted up as separate plants, and then they can go in a sensible position where the new growth will have room to grow, and subsequent new growths, then they can stay in the pot undisturbed for quite a while, which is obviously a goal, something worth aiming at. So when you've got reasonable quality media, you should expect at least a couple of years out of it if it's bark. You start adding moss in and using the smaller grade, you might not get that long, because the implication is that you're probably after something that stays moist a lot longer, so it will degrade faster. But yep, so it grows well, it blooms well, fragrance is gorgeous, a well worth having plant if you can get hold of it. This is one of my larger plants. This is Miltonia Sunset. Reliable grower for me and reliable bloomer. But nonetheless, it has now totally filled its pot. So if we look down here, there's a new growth here. Has that one actually bloomed? I can't remember. I think that's an old spike in there, is it? Yes, that's an old spike, so that growth has actually bloomed. But if you look at the base of it, there are some new roots forming. So I could take the risk and actually repot this now, prior to the new growth starting, which might not be a bad idea. The problem I've got is that to keep this snug, I would have to remove some back bulbs. If I took off this one, and this one, then it would have like a flat back to it that could come right back up against the pot and leave room for the newer growths, which are liable to either come out up in the middle, like some of these have, straight up through the middle of the plant, or around the edge of the plant where some of these have. So I'll have to have a think about that one. But there's still enough of the year left for me to do that. And yeah, decision. I'm not going to make a decision today. I've got too much to do. But I'm going to mark it down as a potential repot now. If I don't do it now, it won't be the end of the world. It's got a massive root system in the pot that is good and hydrates the plant well. So if some of the new growths do climb out of the pot, it won't be the end of the world. But there is a lot of wasted space in the pot round the back here. There aren't going to be any new growths in this area here. So this bit of the pot's totally wasted. But nonetheless, disturbing it now as we go into winter might not be the best of ideas, even though there are new roots forming. So I think I'll probably leave it. But it is a big one. And it does need to grow new roots now, or, you know, to get any more blooms. Everything on there that's capable of blooming already has. And it's coming into its period where some of the oldest leaves are starting to yellow. That's not a panic. Just if you get a pot full of leaves like that, just track the leaves back, like the yellow one here. Is that on a new growth? Because if it was, I'd worry. But it's not. It's on this pseudo bulb right round here. One of the oldest ones, so those two leaves yellowing are not a big deal. So yeah, it grows well and blooms well for me, and it's a popular plant. It's had a couple of sequences of mass production, so you get a massive influx onto the market through the cloning process, and it's proved popular. So who knows, they may top it up again. But the mass producers sometimes, you know, they do they produce a cross, or recreate a cross, then they clone it, flood the market with it, and next time they try it, it's not as popular. So they'll just stop doing it, and it'll start becoming scarce. You know, if that market's not topped up, then people buy the plants, and then there's none left, because they're not getting recreated. So we'll see how that one goes, but that one's popular. I know lots of people have got that. This is one of the two Sharry babies that I've actually got, and that spike's coming off because that's done. So I think that's the last, probably the last spike that plant's going to produce until we get some new growths, which shouldn't be long coming now. This isn't a bad plant. It wasn't very good when it was put in its pot. But it then suddenly had a root burst and suddenly created quite a good root system which hydrates the plant well. So for once I've actually got a reasonable looking plant, because my Sharry babies in the past have not done very well. And man speak with forked tongue, this is actually a new growth over here that's immature. So it is possible that it could spike on that growth as well. But if it does, it'll be a winter growth because it's not mature yet. Winter spike, sorry. That's not a big deal. You know, it might not be quite as vigorous as a spike produced in the height of the growing season, but a spike's a spike. We have them when they're going, whenever they choose. And again, Sharry baby's got, for me, this has got about a 10-month cycle. But if it produces new growths at different points, then that cycle's reduced. If there's only one new growth, it'll, you know, from the first point that you see the new growth to the point it matures is about 9 to 10 months, and that's when the spike should appear. But if you get new growths that are 2 or 3 months apart, then obviously, you know, you've got a second flush of blooms in a shorter space of time, which is good. And the bigger the plant, the more chance of that happening. So I'd always be wary of keep splitting the plants up. Every time you split a plant, you're effectively weakening it. Although in some cases it does seem to sort of rejuvenate them and give them a kick, especially if you've got a large number of old leafless bulbs. They can become a burden, yeah? Because it's always trying to keep all the bulbs plumped up, you know, with some stored energy within them. Well, you know, those older bulbs are taking some of the energy from the front end of the plant. So, you know, you need a reasonable balance. I mean, this particular plant has got no leafless bulbs on it. These will be the next two leaves to drop, and that is the oldest bulb. One leafless bulb on that plant's going to do it no harm at all. But if it had, like, say 3 or 4 leaved bulbs and 7 or 8 old bulbs, it's out of balance. Yeah? So your chances are you're draining some of the energy from the front end of the plant. So it's always worth just keeping an eye on your plant, see if it looks in balance. And the number of older bulbs, don't let them get too many that they're draining the plant. That's the time when it's good to split off the older part. And if you want to feel adventurous, every old pseudobulb that you take off is capable of producing a new shoot if it's separated. Yeah? It's just the disturbance seems to trigger. So you can end up with a back bulb division. So you've got an old bulb. It doesn't even matter if it's got leaves on, quite honestly, but give it some base. Don't sink it in anything, because obviously it's probably going to have very few, if any, roots on it. So just sit it on something nicely, hold it in place with a stake or something, and a bit of moisture around the base. You could trigger a new growth, which starts a new plant. But just remember, you'll need to be patient, because it's probably not going to bloom until 2 or 3 new growths have grown. And it's become an established plant again. So you're adding quite a bit of time in there by doing back bulb divisions. But nonetheless, you can get a new plant. And they work quite well. Now this is Miltonia Sunset, another very, very popular Oncidium Alliance type. And this one I want to use to demonstrate something that epitomises a vigorous Oncidium type grower. Not all are. You will often get some that progress in a linear fashion. So after each bulb matures and blooms, it produces another one. And if you're lucky, you might get 2. And then you've got 2 separate leads. But I can show you on this one, I hope. First of all, we've got to find the back of the plant. That's round here. So this is the oldest part of the plant. And as you can see, it headed off in this direction and produced this new growth, which then produced this one. But if you come down inside the plant, it not only produced this one, it headed off in this direction as well. Yeah? And then this one here also headed off in a separate direction. And this piece over here came out of the other side and headed off in a different direction. And now you can see what I'm getting at. We've got a direction of growth here, finished blooming, putting out its latest new growth that's just about got room around the edge of the pot. And this direction of growth, finished blooming, just starting its new growth, and it's got just about got room to get some roots down in the pot. And then right round this side is the other direction of growth that's only just finished blooming, and this one hasn't started its new growth yet, but it probably will. And you think, well, that's not bad going. But then if you get right down in the plant, it's chucking another new growth up in the middle. Yeah, so that's currently got 3 new growths, and I know we'll have a 4th. The bulge is there. I know it's coming. So that'll have 4 new growths. And with a reasonable root system in the pot, I don't need to disturb it. The media's not that old. Yeah, there's room for the new growths to hang over the pot, and some of the roots will get down in the pot, so that can remain undisturbed. And then when those new growths have finished blooming, it'll be time to think about getting it out of the pot. And we then have to make the decision. I don't like big pots on the grounds that it's very difficult to get big, shallow pots. The bigger the pot gets, the deeper it gets. And the deeper it gets, the more likely you are to get that soggy bottom effect. Because the roots won't get down into the bottom of the pot. They don't tend to go that deep. So this shaped pot is brilliant for these types because it's shallow and wide. So you can get a much larger plant in it without disturbing it. And the roots will fill the pot. So once you've filled a pot with roots like that, the chances of keeping it too soggy get slimmer and slimmer because those roots will use the moisture. But if it had that much added onto the bottom, they probably wouldn't. Yeah? So I love this shaped pot, but that's the biggest one I've ever seen so far. But it would be great if I could get another one, like say an inch or so larger across the top without going any deeper. That would be good. But I haven't seen any so far. But yeah, that plant grows well for me. It's another vigorous grower, blooms well, reliably, and is a good plant to have, and a very popular one. This is Dendrobium, excuse me, gruff, Dendrobium Chryslertox, and it was the one that I debated whether it may have been misnamed because of its sheer size. But reading up and doing a bit of investigations, and knowing the person that I bought this from's, I haven't seen the growing environment, but knowing the type of plant she specialises in, which is mainly Masdevallias and the like, and smaller growers and cooler growers, yeah, this may have been reaching for the light, and therein lies the secret. Apparently, if given sufficient light, possibly a little over the top maybe, it remains a medium-sized plant. Yeah, without the light it'll reach for it, and it'll grow much longer canes, and hence it'll end up this big when it might not in other conditions. Now, I took the risk with this. I had to repot it. The lady in question said, it's been in the pot ages, you'll need to repot it. So I did, and I took a risk because it's quite a large pot. Yes, it's a large plant, but it's also a dendrobium type with canes, and they do like to be snug in their pot. They love it. Lovely, all squashed in, roots practically taking over the whole pot. That they like that, yeah? But I thought, if this is going to grow, it could fill the pot, and my risk has worked, basically. I do have a pot full of roots. We've got these two new canes here. They're nearly full height. Now, if they don't get to full height, they may just look that they haven't grown as well. But it could just be that it's had the correct light for the plant this year for the first time, and so the canes are more normal size. It's got another new growth pushing up here, which is a little bit of a nuisance with a mealybug. The numbers of those have gone right down. Hardly finding any now, but there's just a couple on that leaf. Small enough to squish and not worry about. But again, this side of the plant, because it's got a new growth, is now producing roots as well. These are the old roots down here. Everything that's white with a green tip is new this year, and there's plenty of them, and it's still chucking them out. So I've now got to go and look this one up, because I'm reasonably certain this needs a cooler, dry winter rest to get to instigate the blooms. Like a lot of dendrobiums, but I don't know for certain. I haven't had the plant long enough. This is its first winter, and with a root system like that and enough leaves on it like that, it's plenty strong enough to stand a rest should I choose to do that. But choosing to do it will be based on its need. So I need to look this one up now. I didn't need to look it up when I got it. Growing season, feed and water well, whoosh. You don't need to look it up. But this is the time of year I need to start thinking about it now, because if it is going to get a winter rest, I need to start reducing that feed down, but not yet, because I've still got a cane growing. Now I might have to effectively sacrifice that growth for the benefit of all the others, because all of these are blooming size canes. Some have actually bloomed before, but they can produce multiple spikes on a cane. So even though a cane's bloomed, it can still bloom again. That one hasn't bloomed yet. That one has, this one hasn't. The two new canes haven't. Yeah, this one hasn't. So there's plenty of canes on there capable of blooming, and I don't want to lose that chance for the sake of one new growth when I've got two good ones. So that one might stall a little bit due to lack of feed as I reduce it down, and then the drier period, you know, give it the rest. And at that point it'll probably need bright light as well. That'll be easy for that one, because it's in a pot. So it can just go up against the glass when the shade netting comes off. Job done. But yeah, I need to look that one up. But it's grown on well this year. I am well pleased with that pot full of canes and its ability to push out several spikes per cane on those that haven't already bloomed, and a potential for the odd spike on some of them that already have. So we could end up with a pretty good show from that in the spring. The only problem with this one is it does come into that category of not very long-lived blooms. I don't think you even get 3 weeks out of them. We'll see. That's to be found, you know, I don't know yet. because I haven't had it. I do believe it still had some blooms on it when I got it, but if it was in bloom, how can I tell how long they last when some of that blooming period was in somebody else's care? So we'll have to wait and see. But I'm pretty sure it's a winter rester, so I'll do a little bit of work, cross-reference and all that, and make sure it's the right information and not just one person's idea contradicting everybody else. But when you get that, you've always got to stand back and say, perhaps that one person's right and all the others are wrong. You never know. That's another one of the biggies. Now, the tag says Odontoglossum naeviem, which is quite an old Odontoglossum type species, but I can virtually guarantee it's been reclassified as Oncidium, and it may not have even kept its species name as a consequence. But nonetheless, this is another example of a different way of growing, because this type of Oncidium, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that all the Odontoglossums grow like this. This just happens to be the growth pattern for this individual species. But it likes to form a mound, and it's quite happy to push up new growths in the centre of the plant, and does it regularly. Yeah? And those new growths will push their roots down all in amongst the other pseudobulbs to get to the media. So it's not a problem on this one. That is how it grows. And it does extend sideways as well. It will produce some new growths that do actually appear on the edge of the plant. But it forms a mound. And you can see there's a new growth here. There's another one here. Another one coming out here. And they're all near the top of the plant. Another one here. Yeah. So this bloomed pretty well earlier in the year. Very pretty little blooms. Might do a pop-up, you never know. That's it, give me more work to do, why don't you? But nonetheless, it's a very pretty bloom. It is incredibly attractive, and virtually no fragrance, if any, but well worth it for the blooms. And for me, this one grows quite vigorously. And there is a front and a back to this plant, which is a nuisance, because when it got potted up, predicting where the new growths were going to come from, I got it wrong. And nothing came out the back of the plant, so I ended up with a bit of a gap at the back end. But nonetheless, I'm okay with this one. Hasn't too long been repotted, so it can still stay in its pot for this next sequence of new growths. And as you can see, most of them are in the centre of the plant anyway, and the roots are going to go down through the middle. Yeah, they'll probably head out towards the edge of the pot from there, but yeah, it can stay where it is for a bit and grow on and have another sequence of blooming on these new growths before I need to worry about if and when I need to repot it. But it grows pretty good for me. Some lovely leaves on some of the more mature growths. Yeah, I think there's one little, where is it? Oh, there. One little leaf got a bit of concertina on it. But, it's a vigorous plant for me. Cool grower, I have to keep this down at floor level. Don't let it get up in the heat, won't do it any good at all. And that really goes across the board with virtually everything. If you can identify an original name from an Oncidium species that goes back and was once called an Odontoglossum, you can almost guarantee it will be a cool grower. That seemed to be the main difference. Why at one point they were possibly separated out. Anyway, all Oncidiums now, whether we like it or not, but my tag stays as is. This will be the last. I really have got a gruff voice today. This will be the last one for today. He says brightly, not growling at people. This is my Oncidium Twink or yellow, and this one got me some silverware at the beginning of the year. It just happened to produce all of its spikes at the same time, and they were nice and evenly spaced around the plant, arching away from the centre. It looked really good, and quite honestly, for once, the silverware was well deserved. But at the moment, it's only got one growth that's recently matured, so there's only one spike. There's plenty more new growths coming on behind. But this plant, after its mass blooming, had a major upheaval. I literally had to take some of the older bulbs off, get it out of its pot, and repot it. So it's now coming on again. But we do have quite a few new growths pushing on nicely. So that looked like a scale. It's just where one was, I think, rather than where one is. Yeah, so new growth pushing on, one spike at the moment, but like I said, that got silverware for its blooming in the spring. I think there's another spike there actually. Yeah, no, 2 spikes. Same growth, yeah, one each side. Yeah, a healthy twinkle ought to do that. 1 spike each side of each new growth as it matures. It won't do it again because it's not got the number of new growths. It won't get that mass blooming this time, but nonetheless it should still produce reasonable amount of blooms. And they'll be in succession this time. So we'll get these 2, followed by some more, possibly after a month or so, because the other new growths are a bit behind. So it'll be a staggered blooming this time. It's just coincidence they all produced their blooms at the same time last time. But yeah, it's another example of miles away from an annual cycle. If that was in bloom at our spring show, that was the end of February this year, and it's producing spikes again now. Now, twinkle spikes are notoriously slow to get to actually open their blooms, so don't hold your breath for this one, but it's going to be well away from the February blooming it had last time round. So you're looking at probably around 9 months between bloomings. So the time of year keeps changing. And I'll leave it at that for today. I don't want to make each video too long, so I'll pick up from where I've left off. I've picked up, you know, most of what I've picked up and watered so far today I've filmed, and I'll carry on next time. See you then.